She walked slowly through the busy market streets, her head low, her hair messy, her clothes dirty. The sun was high, but for her, the light brought no warmth. Everywhere she went, whispers followed, and laughter cut through the air like knives. "Look, it's the filthy mayor!" someone shouted, and the crowd burst into cruel laughter. She kept walking, pretending not to hear, but the words burned in her chest like fire. Her real name had been forgotten long ago. Once she had been known as Lyra, but nobody remembered that now. For the people of this alien city, she was only a joke, a creature to laugh at, a symbol of shame. Children threw stones at her, women spat on the ground as she passed, and men cursed her as bad luck. Yet she did not cry. She did not scream. She only kept walking. Her silence made the hatred grow stronger, for they could not break her spirit. The market was full of bright colors, shining fruits and the smell of strange spices. Merchants shouted for customers, their voices loud and full of life. But whenever she came near, their faces turned cold. "Go away, filthy mare," one merchant said, pulling his goods away from her touch. She reached out hungry, her thin fingers shaking, but the merchant pushed her back with disgust. The crowd laughed again, the sound like thunder rolling across the stones. In the middle of the market stood a fountain, tall and shining with clear water running from its mouth. She went there often, not to drink, because they would not let her, but to feel the cool mist on her face. But today, even that small comfort was stolen from her. A group of young men blocked her path, their faces full of hate. "You don't belong here," one shouted. "Go crawl in the mud where you came from." They pushed her, and she fell to the ground, her knees bleeding, her hands scraping on the rough stone. The crowd did not help her. They only watched, some cheering, some laughing. For them, this was entertainment, a daily show. For her, it was life. But deep inside her, something never broke. She had lived through worse. She had survived storms, war, and betrayal. She had lost everything, yet her heart still beat. She whispered to herself, so softly no one could hear, "One day things will change." That was the moment he appeared. A human, tall, strong, with eyes that looked around the market with calm but sharp focus. He wore a traveler's cloak, dusty from many worlds, and his face carried the weight of long journeys. The people noticed him at once, for humans were rare here. Some whispered, some pointed, some even stepped back in fear, but he did not care about their stares. His eyes had already found her, the broken woman on the ground, and instead of disgust, his gaze carried something different, something she had not seen in years. Pity, yes, but also respect, the young. Men who had pushed her laughed at him. "Careful, stranger," one said. "That thing is cursed, touch her and you will suffer." The human ignored them. He stepped forward, offering his hand. She looked up, shocked, unsure if this was another trick, but his hand was steady, strong and patient. Slowly, she placed her fingers in his palm. He pulled her up, not roughly, but gently, as if she were something fragile and precious. The crowd gasped. Never before had anyone dared to touch the filthy mare. Never before had anyone shown her kindness. "Are you mad?" Someone shouted. "She is nothing, she is less than dirt." But the human did not answer. He only turned to her and said in a voice low but clear, "What is your name?" Her lips trembled, for no one had asked her that in years. She opened her mouth, but the sound came out broken. My name," she whispered. "Lyra?" The human smiled, and for a moment the market noise disappeared. "Lyra," he repeated. "That is a strong name." The people around them roared with anger. "Do not speak to her. She is a curse. She is a shame to this city." The human looked at them, his face calm but his voice sharp. "Shame does not live in her," he said. "It lives in you." Silence fell, heavy and deep. No one had ever spoken like that. Not here, not in this cruel city. For the first time in years, Lyra felt something rise inside her. It was small, fragile, but alive. Hope. The human took off his cloak and placed it gently over her shoulders. The crowd gasped again, unable to believe what they were seeing. She looked at him, her eyes wide, her heart racing. Who was this man? Why did he care? And why, in his presence, did the world suddenly feel different? For the first time in forever, she felt like she was not alone. But deep in the shadows of the market, other eyes watched, dark, hateful eyes that burned with rage. At this act of defiance, the human had broken an unspoken law, and now, danger would follow him. Lyra did not know yet. But her life had just changed forever. The mocking name, filthy mare, would not last much longer. Something new was beginning, and the galaxy itself would tremble at what was coming. The market had fallen into silence after the human lifted Lyra from the ground. The crowd did not know whether to laugh, to scream, or to run. Never before had anyone treated her like a person. Never before had anyone spoken against them so boldly. Yet this stranger, this human, stood calmly in the middle of it all, as if he belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. He was called Elias, though no one here knew his name. To the people of this world, he was just another traveler, passing through the stars. But his eyes carried something heavy, as if he had seen battles, loss, and victories written in blood. He looked at Lyra, not with fear, not with disgust, but with a strange respect. It was as if he saw something in her that the rest of the world had forgotten. Why? Lyra asked softly, still clutching the cloak he had given her. Her voice was weak, like a flame about to die. Why do you help me? Don't you see what they call me? Elias studied her, his gaze steady, his voice low but firm. I see what they cannot, he said. I see someone still standing even when the whole world wants her to fall. The crowd around them erupted again, angry voices crashing like a storm. She is cursed. She will bring you death. Leave her, human, before it is too late. But Elias did not move, his feet rooted like stone. Instead, he reached into his satchel and pulled out a small flask of water. He uncapped it and held it out to Lyra. The crowd gasped louder, for this was not just kindness. This was defiance. To offer her water was to declare her life had value. Lyra hesitated, her hands trembling. It had been days since she last drank clean water, but she feared the trick, the trap, the humiliation. Still, his eyes told her something her heart wanted to believe. She reached out, her fingers brushing the flask, and lifted it to her lips. The water was cool, pure, and it felt like life itself flowing into her body. Tears filled her eyes, not from the water, but from the memory that someone had once again treated her as human. Elias said nothing more, but the act itself spoke louder than words. The merchants cursed him, the guards whispered, and the citizens moved back in fear. Already rumors were spreading. This human was challenging their way of life, and in a city built on cruelty, such a challenge could only end in blood. That night, after the market had closed and the streets had emptied, Elias walked through the city. Lyra followed at a distance, still unsure if she could trust him. Her steps were quiet, but her heart pounded. Why did he care? What did he want? No one helped. Without reason, not here, not in this world of betrayal. When he finally stopped at a small inn, he turned to face her. You should not follow me unless you are ready, he said, his voice calm. Ready for what? She whispered, her voice shaking. For change, Elias replied. And change always brings danger. She froze, her breath catching. Danger had always been her shadow, but something about him made her want to face it, instead of run from it. Inside the inn, whispers spread quickly. A human has brought her here, the innkeeper murmured. The filthy mare in my house? Elias laid down coins on the counter, more than enough to silence the man's tongue. She stays, Elias said firmly, his tone brooking no argument. The innkeeper swallowed hard and nodded, too greedy to refuse, too afraid to protest, in the eye. Small room upstairs, Lyra sat on the floor, still clutching his cloak. She looked around, unused to walls that offered safety. Elias sat across from her, his eyes sharp but not unkind. Tell me, he said, who made you like this? Who gave you that name? Lyra's throat tightened. her memories clawing their way back. Once she had been from a respected family. Once she had lived in light. But betrayal had shattered it all. The council, the rulers of this world, had declared her family traitors. Her parents were executed, her home destroyed, and she was branded with shame. The people were told to call her filthy mare, and they obeyed until her true name vanished, swallowed by cruelty. Her voice broke as she spoke, but Elias listened without interrupting. His silence was not empty. It was respect. When she finished, her eyes wet with tears, he leaned forward. "They wanted to erase you," he said, "but they failed, because here you are, still breathing, still fighting, even in silence." Lyra stared at him, confusion and hope mixing in her chest. "No one has ever said that to me," she whispered. "Then no one has been looking closely enough," Elias replied. The night grew darker, and outside the city prepared its cruelty for tomorrow. But in that room, something small and powerful was born. A bond, fragile but real, a spark that the universe itself would one day notice. For the first time, Lyra felt she was not only surviving, she was beginning to live again. And in Elias's presence, she felt the shadow of her curse slowly lifting. But beyond the walls, the council already knew. Whispers of rebellion spread like fire, and the humans' defiance had not gone unseen. Lyra's past was about to collide with Elias's future, and together, they would stand against a world that wanted them broken. The stranger was no longer just a stranger. He was the beginning of something greater. And though Lyra did not yet understand it, her story had only just begun. The night was heavy with silence. Yet inside the small room above the inn, Lyra could not sleep. The cloak Elias had given her lay across her shoulders, warm against the chill, but warmth could not erase the memories that clawed at her mind. Memories of fire, of loss, of betrayal. Elias sat across from her, his back against the wall, his eyes sharp even in the dim light. He had not asked for her story again, but she could feel his patience. It was not the patience of someone who waited for entertainment. It was the patience of someone who cared, someone who knew pain, and that made the silence heavier until, finally, she spoke. "My name was Lyra Avalon," she whispered, her voice trembling. The name sounded strange in her own mouth, as if it belonged to another life. "I was not always this," she said, her eyes downcast. "Once, I lived in a house of light, with gardens that touched the sky, with halls filled with laughter." Her voice broke, and for a moment she almost stopped, but Elias did not move. He only gave a small nod, urging her to go on. "My parents served on the High Council," she continued. "They were loyal, faithful, they worked for peace." Her eyes darkened, shadows swallowing the faint spark. But peace was a lie. The council was rotten, filled with greed, filled with fear of humans, fear of outsiders. She closed her hands into fists. "My parents uncovered secrets. Secrets that could have saved our world but also destroyed the council's power." Elias leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving her. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "They betrayed us," she said, her voice sharp with pain. "The council declared my parents traitors, accused them of selling secrets to humans." She laughed bitterly, though tears slid down her cheeks. Humans, the very ones they wanted peace with. What a perfect lie. Her hands shook as the images came back. The night of fire, soldiers storming their home, torches blazing, her mother's cries, her father's final stand, and the cold decree. The Avalon. "Name shall be erased, the daughter shall be marked." "They killed them before my eyes," she whispered, her voice breaking, "and they gave me a name that was not mine, filthy mare." Her shoulders shook as she spoke. It was not only insult, it was law. They told the people to use it. They told them my real name was gone. Elias's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, letting her pour the weight she had carried for years. "They stripped me of everything," Lyra said. "No home, no friends, no family, just that name." She lifted her arms, showing faint scars, Marks burned into her skin as proof of her shame. And the people obeyed, because to defy the council was to invite death. The room felt smaller with her words, heavy with pain and injustice, but Elias's eyes burned brighter. "They tried to bury you," he said slowly, "but you are still here. That means they failed." She blinked at him, her lips parting in shock. No one had ever said such words to her. Most only spat insults, others looked away. But this human, he looked at her as if she were something unbroken, something whole. "Why do you say that?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "Because I know what it means to lose everything," Elias replied. His voice carried weight, heavy as stone. "I have seen empires fall. I have seen soldiers die nameless. I have seen worlds burn under the lies of those in power." He paused, his hand closing into a fist. "But I also know this. No name, no council, no crowd can define who you are. Only you can do that." For a moment, the silence returned, but this time it was not heavy. It was powerful. Something stirred inside Lyra, something long buried, hope, small but alive, flickered in her chest. But outside, the city was not silent. In the shadows, whispers spread of the human who had touched the cursed woman. In taverns and guardhouses, rumors grew like fire on dry wood. The council already knew, and their anger was sharp. No outsider had ever challenged their will, and no traitor's child was ever meant to rise again. Lyra's story was not safe with Elias. By speaking her truth, she had given him her burden, but also painted a target on his back. She looked at him, fear creeping into her heart. "You should not have helped me," she said, her voice urgent. "The council will hear of this. They will come for you. They will come for both of us." Elias did not flinch. "Let them come," he said calmly, his voice carrying the weight of steel. "I have faced worse than councils, and if they come for you, they will find me standing in their way." Her eyes widened, her breath caught. No one had ever said they would stand for her. No one had ever chosen her side, not since the night of fire. And now, this stranger from the stars was willing to fight an entire world for her. For the first time, the title filthy mare felt like a lie she could cast aside. Her name, Lyra Avalon, rang again in her heart, and though danger grew in the streets, though whispers of blood filled the air, she felt stronger than she had in years, because in the eyes of the human stranger she was not broken. She was not shame. She was Lyra, and her dark past was no longer just a wound. It was the fire that would light her future. The morning came heavy with tension. The market streets were alive again, but whispers hung in the air like smoke. Everywhere Elias walked, eyes followed him, sharp and filled with suspicion, and wherever Lyra stepped, the whispers grew into curses, louder than before. The people had seen the human touch her, feed her, defend her, and in their eyes that was unforgivable. For years they had mocked her freely without fear, but now someone had challenged their cruelty. And if their cruelty was challenged, their whole world trembled. Lyra kept her hood low, hiding her face, but the insults still reached her. Curse-bearer, traitor's spawn, human's pet. She tried to keep walking, but her hands shook under the weight of their hate. Elias walked beside her, calm but unshaken. Every word they threw at her only sharpened his silence into steel. At the edge of the market, a group of guards stepped forward, blocking their path. Their armor gleamed, their spears lowered. "Human," the captain said sharply, "you will release that woman at once." Elias met the man's eyes without fear. "Release her?" he asked, his voice steady. "She is not a prisoner," the captain sneered. "She is property of the council, marked by shame. She belongs to no one, and yet to everyone." The words cut deep into Lyra's chest, but Elias did not falter. "She belongs to herself," he replied firmly. The crowd gasped, their anger flaring. No one had ever spoken such words. No one had dared. The guards stepped closer, their spears gleaming in the sun. "Leave her, stranger," the captain warned, "or we will drag you both through the streets." Elias's hand rested lightly on his belt where a blade hung. He did not draw it, but his calmness carried the weight of storms. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice low but final. The tension cracked like lightning. The guards hesitated, unused to resistance, but the crowd roared, "Seize him! Seize the filthy mayor!" The guards surged forward, but Elias moved faster. His blade flashed in the sunlight, not striking but blocking. The captain's spear clanged against steel, sparks flying. The people screamed, scattering in panic. Merchants grabbed their goods. Children hid behind stalls. Lyra froze, her heart racing as the fight broke around her. But Elias moved like a storm, controlled, unshaken. His blade never wasted a strike. Every movement was precise. The guards pressed harder, but fear grew in their eyes. This was no ordinary traveler. Lyra's breath caught, torn between terror and awe. No one had ever fought for her, not once. And here was a stranger defying an entire city's guards for her sake. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. The captain staggered back, his spear broken in half. His men lay groaning on the ground, defeated but alive. Elias lowered his blade, his eyes cold but calm. "I did not come here to fight," he said, his voice ringing across the square. "But if you strike her, you strike me, and I will not fall." The crowd was silent, too shocked to move. No one had ever spoken against the council's decree. No one had ever defended the cursed woman, and no one had ever beaten the guards in open daylight. Lyra's chest tightened, tears threatening her eyes. For the first time, she did not feel like a shadow. For the first time, she felt seen, but far above the market in the high towers of the city, the council watched. Their spies had carried the tale quickly. The human's defiance, his words, his fight, nothing escaped their notice. Inside the great chamber, the councilors spoke in anger. "This human must be silenced," one growled. "He dares to lift the cursed girl. He dares to shame us in front of the people." Another spat. "If the people begin to believe her curse is false, our hold will weaken," whispered a third. Their voices filled the chamber, sharp with fear, hidden behind pride. At last, the high speaker rose, his robe heavy with jewels. "Send for him," the speaker said. "Bring him before us. If he kneels, he lives. If he resists, he dies." "And the girl?" a counselor asked. The speaker's eyes gleamed coldly. "She will return to her shame, or she will burn." Back in the streets, Elias guided Lyra away from the square. Her hands shook as she tried to speak, but words failed her. "You should not have done that," she whispered finally, her voice breaking. "They will come for you now. They will come for both of us." Elias stopped, turning to face her, his gaze sharp but steady. "I know," he said. "And that is why you must decide." "Decide?" she asked, confused. "Whether you will keep running from them," Elias said, "or stand with me and make them answer for what they did to you." Her heart pounded, torn between fear and the fire awakening. Inside her, for years she had survived by silence, by hiding, by accepting shame. But now, for the first time, someone offered her another path, a path of defiance, of truth, of freedom. Her lips trembled, but her voice came firm. "I am tired of running," she whispered. Elias gave a single nod, his eyes glinting with approval. "Then we stand together," he said. The world around them grew darker with danger. But for the first time in years, the word hope did not feel like a lie. Together they would face the city, the council, and the shadows of the past. And together, they would shake the very ground that once mocked her name. Night wrapped the city in shadows. The air was thick with silence. But beneath it, danger stirred. Lyra sat in the small inn-room, her hands gripping the cloak Elias had given her. Her heart refused to calm, every beat reminding her of the fight in the market. The council would not forgive such defiance, and deep inside she knew this night would not pass quietly. Elias stood by the window, his blade resting against the wall. He had not spoken much since the battle, but his eyes never stopped scanning the streets below. "Sleep if you can," he said softly, though his voice carried the edge of warning. Lyra shook her head. "Sleep is not for nights like this." She tried to smile, but fear pulled it away. Hours passed. The city grew quieter. until only the distant howl of wind remained. Then footsteps, many of them surrounding the inn. Elias's hand went to his blade at once, his eyes narrowing. "They're here," he said, calm but certain. Lyra's blood turned cold, her body frozen. The door burst open, splinters flying. Dark figures rushed in, their faces hidden behind iron masks. Blades gleamed in their hands, their movements fast and merciless. The council had sent assassins, not guards. These men were meant to kill, not capture. Elias moved like lightning, his blade cutting the air. Steel clashed with steel, sparks burst in the dark. The assassins surrounded him, striking from every side. But he stood strong, blocking, countering, forcing them back, step by step. Lyra pressed herself against the wall, her chest heaving. Fear gripped her, but anger boiled too. Anger at the council. At the years of shame, she watched Elias fighting for her life, his strength burning like fire. And guilt struck her heart like a blade. All these years, she had only run, only hidden. Now he risked everything for her. And she could do nothing. One assassin slipped past Elias, his dagger flashing toward her. Time slowed, the blade rushing closer. Lyra's scream tore through the night, raw and desperate. But with the scream came something else, something buried deep within her. The room shook, the air cracked like thunder. A wave of force exploded from her body, invisible but powerful. The assassin was thrown backward, smashing into the wall with a sickening crack. The others staggered, their balance broken. Elias turned, shock flashing in his eyes. Not fear, only surprise, as if he had seen something awaken. Lyra's body trembled, her hands glowing faintly with light. She gasped, staring at them, terror and wonder mixing in her chest. What is this?" she whispered, but there was no time for answers. The assassins roared, trying to regain their attack. Elias cut one down with a sharp strike, another charged. But before his blade reached, Lyra raised her hand. Power burst again, unseen but unstoppable. The assassin flew across the room, crashing through a table. The glow around her hands flickered, wild and untamed. Her whole body shook, as if the power was too big, too heavy. Memories rushed back, moments from her childhood she had buried. Her mother's voice whispering, "You have a gift, Lyra. One day it will protect you." She had forgotten those words, buried them under years of pain, but now they returned, burning bright. The last assassin fled, fear in his eyes. Even hardened killers knew when death stood before them. The room fell into silence again, broken only by Lyra's ragged breathing. The glow faded slowly from her hands, leaving only shaking fingers and wide eyes. Elias stepped closer, his blade lowering. "Lyra," he said softly, his voice steady, though his eyes burned with questions. She looked at him, her face pale. "I didn't mean to. I didn't know I could." Her voice cracked, her body trembling. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "You don't have to fear it," he said. "This power is not a curse. It's a weapon, and it's yours." Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "All this time I thought I was nothing," she whispered. "Not nothing," Elias corrected, his gaze unwavering. "Something greater than they ever knew. Something they feared. That's why they tried to bury you under shame." Her heart pounded, his words striking deeper than the power itself. Could it be true? Was her curse not a curse at all, but the key to something greater? Outside, the city stirred with new whispers. Some spoke of the human's defiance, others of the cursed woman's scream that shook the night. The council heard both, and their anger grew into fear. "The girl has awakened," the high speaker said, his voice sharp as steel. "She must be destroyed before the people see her for what she is." But in the small room of the inn, Lyra sat trembling, Elias standing by her side. The fear was still there, yes, but now it was joined by something else, a spark of power, alive and undeniable. She was no longer only the mocked, the broken, the cursed. Something within her had awakened, something that belonged to her and her alone. Elias looked out the window, his jaw tight, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "They will come harder now," he said. Lyra swallowed, nodding. "Then let them come," she whispered, her voice still shaking but no longer hollow. For the first time in years, she felt strength rising inside her, not borrowed, not given, but her own. And though she did not yet understand it, that secret power would change everything. The council chamber was built to inspire fear. Tall pillars of black stone rose high above, casting shadows that swallowed the floor. Glowing symbols burned on the walls, reminders of power and law. And at the far end, on their golden thrones, the council sat, robed in silk and pride. Into this chamber walked Elias and Lyra. The heavy doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. Guards lined the walls, their spears sharp, their eyes cold. The room smelled of smoke and iron, as if even the air bent under the weight of judgment. The high speaker leaned forward, his jeweled crown catching the light. "So," he said, his voice smooth but full of venom, "the filthy mare returns, not in chains but in defiance." Lyra stiffened at the insult, her heart racing, but Elias's hand brushed hers lightly, steadying her. "I am not here to crawl," Lyra said, her voice shaking but clear. "I am here to speak what you tried to silence." The counselors laughed, their voices echoing across the chamber. "You have no right to speak," one sneered. "You are a stain, a curse, a shame that should have been ended long ago," said another. But Elias stepped forward, his voice sharp as steel. "She has more right to speak than all of you," he declared, "because she carries truth while you carry lies." The chamber fell into silence, the council's eyes narrowing. "You dare speak against us, human?" the high speaker asked. Elias's gaze did not waver. "I do not just speak against you. I stand against you." The guards shifted, ready to strike, but the speaker lifted a hand. "No," he said slowly. "Let them talk. Let us hear what the cursed one believes she can say." Lyra's heart pounded, but she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You killed my parents," she said. "You called them traitors, but it was you who betrayed our world. You feared the truth they uncovered. You feared peace with the humans, so you destroyed them and you branded me." The counselor's smiles faltered, her words cut like knives through the air. "You thought I would break," Lyra continued, her voice growing stronger. "You thought I would vanish in shame, but I am still here. I am still alive. And I am not your curse." The guard shifted again, restless, but still held back by the speaker's command. The counselors sneered, but their eyes betrayed unease. Elias's voice rose beside her, steady and fierce. "You built your power on fear, on silencing voices, on burying the truth. But the truth rises even from ashes." The speaker's face hardened, his calm mask cracking. "You are nothing but a broken girl and a reckless human," he spat. "You cannot fight a council. You cannot fight the will of an entire world." At that moment, the chamber doors burst. Open, dozens of citizens poured in, their faces drawn by whispers of the cursed woman's awakening. They had heard of her scream in the night, of the assassins who fled in terror. Now they came to see with their own eyes. Lyra turned, her heart trembling. For years these people had mocked her, spat at her, thrown stones. Now they stood in silence, waiting, watching. This was her moment, her choice. She lifted her chin, her voice ringing through the chamber. "You called me filthy mare, you named me curse," she said. "But I am not your insult. I am not your shame. I am Lyra Avalon, daughter of truth, and I will not bow to you." The chamber shook as her words echoed. Light flickered around her hands, the same hidden power awakening again. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in fear, others leaning forward. In awe, the speaker rose to his feet, his robe swirling. "Seize her!" he roared. The guards rushed forward, their spears raised, but before they reached her, Lyra's power erupted. A wave of force burst from her body, shattering the nearest weapons, throwing guards off their feet. The chamber roared with chaos, shouts and screams filling the air. Elias drew his blade, standing at her side. Together they faced the guards. his steel striking, her power flaring. The council watched in fury as their control cracked before their eyes. Citizens in the crowd began to shout, not insults but cheers. Lyra, Lyra, some cried. The name, her real name, echoed louder than the council's commands. The speaker pounded his staff on the floor, his voice shaking with rage. She is a danger. She will destroy us all. But the people no longer listened. They saw not a curse but a woman rising against chains. They saw hope, and hope was more dangerous than any blade. When the fight ended, the guards lay broken but alive. The counselors sat in silence, their pride cracked, their power trembling. Lyra stood in the center of the chamber, her hands still glowing faintly, her chest heaving. She looked at the crowd, at the faces that once spat her name, and she saw something she had never seen before. Respect. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and proud. You are no longer alone, he said softly. Her eyes met his, tears brimming. For the first time she believed it. The council was not destroyed, not yet, but their fear was planted, their control weakened. And in the eyes of the people, the truth had begun to rise. The final stand had only just begun. The council chamber no longer echoed with insults. It echoed with silence, the heavy kind that comes when fear meets truth. The counselors sat frozen on their golden thrones, their robes heavy but their power lighter than before. For the people no longer looked to them with blind obedience. They looked instead at the woman who had stood in defiance. The woman once mocked. Lyra's chest rose and fell, her hands still trembling from the surge of power. The glow had faded, but its memory burned bright in the minds of all who had seen it. She was not curse, not shame, she was strength. Elias stood beside her, his blade lowered, his eyes calm but proud. He had fought for her, but more importantly, she had fought for herself. The guards did not rise again. The council did not order another attack, for they saw the crowd pressing closer, their whispers growing, no longer insults. Now the whispers carried awe, even reverence. The people had feared the council for years, but in that moment they feared Lyra less and trusted her more. The high speaker slammed his staff on the floor, his voice cracking with rage. This is not victory, he snarled. You think yourself free? You are still nothing. A name cannot change what you are. Lyra turned to him, her face pale but her voice steady. You are wrong, she said. A name is everything. For years you stole mine. But now I take it back. I am Lyra Avalon, and nothing you say can make me less. The crowd erupted, voices rising louder than the speaker's fury. Lyra! 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 Her name rolled through the chamber, through the halls, through the city beyond. It was no longer insult, it was song. The council could not stop it. They had lost their weapon of shame, and without it, their hold weakened. The speaker sat back down, his eyes burning with silent hate. But hate could not crush the hope that had begun to rise. Elias touched Lyra's arm gently. It is time to leave, he said. And together, they walked from the chamber. The doors opened and the people followed, not with stones or curses, but with steps of respect. That night the city felt different, the air lighter, the streets quieter. In the small inn room, Lyra sat by the window, staring at the stars. For the first time she did not feel like a shadow pressed against the world. She felt like she belonged beneath that endless sky. Elias entered, setting aside his blade. He watched her silently for a moment before speaking. You know what comes next, he said. The council will not forgive. They will strike again, in secret, in shadow. Lyra nodded, her heart heavy but strong. I know, she said, but I am no longer afraid of them. Elias studied her, the fire in her eyes. The weight of her pain turned into strength. He had met many across the stars, warriors, leaders, dreamers, but none like her. He stepped closer, his voice softer now. You are more than survival, Lyra. You are hope. Her breath caught, her chest tight with emotions she had buried too long. For years, she had been unwanted, unworthy, unloved. But now before her stood someone who did not see a curse, did not see shame. He saw her. Elias, she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her eyes held steady. Why me? Why fight for me? He smiled faintly, though his eyes carried truth, because I did not only see pain in you. I saw courage. I saw fire that even cruelty could not kill. And I could not walk away from that. Her tears fell silently, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of finding something she had thought lost forever. Days passed, then weeks. The council tried to crush the whispers, but the people no longer obeyed so easily. In taverns, in markets, in homes, they spoke her name. Not filthy mare, Lyra, not curse, hope. One evening, beneath the starlit sky of a quiet hill outside the city, Elias turned to her, his voice calm, steady, yet filled with something deeper than battle. Lyra, he said, I have walked many worlds, but nowhere have I found what I found here, with you. Her heart pounded, her breath shallow. He took her hand gently, not as a rescuer, but as an equal. I would walk beside you, not just in fight, but in life, he said, not out of pity, but out of love. Her tears came again, but her smile shone through them. For the first time, she felt truly chosen, truly cherished. I would walk with you, she whispered, her voice trembling but true. And in that moment, beneath the stars, Elias and Lyra sealed not only a bond of survival, but a bond of love. Time moved forward, and though battles still lay ahead, the story of Lyra Avalon spread across the stars, no longer mocked as filthy mare, no longer hidden in shame. She was remembered as the woman who stood when the world tried to break her, and beside her stood the human who saw her worth, when no one else did. Together they built a home not only of walls but of trust, a place where laughter returned, where silence no longer meant shame but peace. And in time, she became not just the human's companion, but his wife, his equal, his strength. The galaxy remembered the insult, but it remembered her triumph more, because in the end she was not broken, she was not curse, she was Lyra, and her name, once drowned in cruelty, became a song of hope,